All right, guys, welcome back to the Low Carb Consultant podcast. So today we've got Alex McDonald on the podcast today. So he is the founder of Keto Marathons, and I would say he's a testament to the power of fat adaptation. So he's got 15 years experience on the ketogenic diet. Alex actually embarked on, I would say, an unprecedented challenge, running 5 marathons in 5 days, all while completely fasted, consuming only water and electrolytes. So his journey wasn't just, I would say, a physical feat, but a scientific experiment, meticulously tracking metrics like blood glucose, ketones, heart rate, and more. So from battling extreme heat to overcoming physical pain, I think Alex's story is a powerful example of how diet and mindset can redefine our limits. So if any of you have ever questioned the necessity of carbs for endurance or wondered about the true capabilities of the human body, I think this episode is probably going to be for you. So Alex, it's great to have you on the show, man, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thank you, Max. I'm super excited to be speaking with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. And I think we uncovered this before we started recording. And one of my first questions was to you, being like, being an endurance athlete, how did you, come across an animal-based diet? But what's even crazier was you were telling me before you even did the 5 marathons in 5 days, you weren't even an endurance athlete at all. You just wanted to kind of prove that an animal-based diet or a ketogenic diet can be used for endurance-based activities, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So my first ever marathon was the first of the 5 that I did back to back. So I these days I probably have to say I'm an endurance athlete, given I've done what I've done. But
Sure.
prior to that, yeah, definitely didn't come at it from, look, I'm an athlete. Let's see what I can do from the nutrition side. It was, let's start with the nutrition. I'd been fat adapted for a very, very long time. I
Hmm.
had, I felt like I had enormous amounts of energy, and I'd learned a way that figured out a way that I could really test that out. So that's where the idea came for the 5 back-to-back marathons in a 5-day fasted period. And I wanted to see, look, if it is a real thing, do I have this much energy stored on my body? And if so, well, if I do it myself, hand on heart, I know it's a real thing.
So, and first off, yeah, that's really really cool. What made you come up with the idea of the 5 marathons in 5 days? Was there a specific reason behind that type of uh, physical activity, or well, like what was like behind that thought process of doing that specifically?
Well, for me, all the stars aligned. So I'd been fat adapted for a very long time. I had
Hmm.
enormous amounts of energy. I would tell everyone that. They'd be like, yeah, that's just you. But I was like, no, it's a real thing. Now, the inspiration for doing the challenge that I set myself here was actually from uh, it was a doctor in the UK, Dr. Ian Lake. So he's a type 1 diabetic, and he did his own experiment, which he wrote a paper on. It's fascinating, where he did 100 miles in 5 days, completely fasted, he and 7 others. So he did it. It's even more extraordinary as a type 1 diabetic. So I thought, wow, that's so cool. What a great way to test this out. It was something within my skill set of being able to demonstrate the amount of energy we have. All I have to do is just keep moving, travel a long way over a long time.
Yeah.
And I thought, look, I can do this. I've got everything I need because I've done the homework. I know what it's like to be fat adapted. I don't have to spend a long time adjusting. And so once I got that idea, I thought this is great. So he did 100 miles in 5 days, which is about 4 marathons over that period. And look, I chose 5 because 5 in 5 days just sounds really cool. And I
Yeah.
thought, you know what, it just, if he can do 4, I can do 5. And honestly, I reached out to him prior to doing it and picked his brain. I said, look, how did you go about it? Am I on the right track? Am I doing the right things? And he gave me an enormous amount of confidence to back myself to say, look, this is really easy. Well, it's not really easy. It is something within the realms of possibilities, because when I mention it to anyone, they're like, no way, you're going to die. Like, this
Yeah.
is insane. And so having someone like Dr. Ian Lake in my camp, and a true pioneer that did this prior to me, gave me a lot of confidence to think, well, I'm not just doing something silly here. There's actually a lot of evidence to support what I'm doing, and a precedent.
Yeah, so I definitely want to maybe get into what you did, if anything, in terms of training leading up to the 5 marathons. But again, going back to what we were kind of uncovering before we started recording here, so you've been fat adapted for over 15 years, you were saying. So I was curious, maybe going back to the beginning here, just to get like a little bit of a background, was there any sort of a reason why in the first place, like you transitioned over to a little bit more of a ketogenic diet?
Yeah, so where I started, call it 15 years ago, I was just like everyone else, following the mainstream diet. I was pretty good. I consider myself very healthy, so I would eat back then very religiously close to the food pyramid. And then I thought, well, look, I came across some information which was, look, let's take a evolutionary approach, which was if it wasn't around in the last 10,000 years, don't eat it. I thought that's pretty cool. Kind of makes sense. I like the idea. So if I'm going to test it out, I'll do it for 1 month and see how we go. And at the end of that 1 month, if I feel a bit better, then I'll find some middle ground between where I was and that point. After that 1 month, it was life changing. I was like, I've never felt better in my life. And in fact, every day I thought I ever felt good prior to that was garbage. Like, it was not even close to feeling good. So for me, it was I just can't go back to the old way of doing it. And so once I had sort of opened up that sort of can of worms, so to speak, it was, well, if I feel this good after a month, what else can I do to continue? Like, what else did I assume was correct that isn't? And what else can I do to feel better and better? So over that 15-year journey, I started out very much at just the low carb end of the spectrum, and then
Sure.
moved my way more into a strict ketogenic diet. And then ultimately now, and for the last sort of 6 or 7 years, pure carnivore is where I'm sitting. So it's across that time, and every sort of step I've made incrementally, I've felt better and unlocked kind of how would I put it? I feel better and better the more I've moved towards that carnivore end of the spectrum. But the biggest change of all of them was going from a mainstream diet to purely low carb, and then after that, it was like, right, how far can I push this?
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. So what was like just basic day-to-day working out like before you did the 5 marathons over 5 days? And let's go back like maybe like 10 years ago. Were you just doing normal workouts as well? Like I'm sure you're a pretty in shape guy, like were you just doing normal like running workouts, strength conditioning workouts? Like what was like the activity like during that time, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so for me, my passion's been longevity. It's a bit of a term these days, but back then it wasn't. It was just my thought was, look, if I can be, call it 70 or 80 and look and feel like I did in my 30s, then that's a huge victory, because everyone else is by then would be, in and out of hospital and dealing with pills, and just sort of life is just sort of surviving and just hanging on. Where I was like, no, I want to attack life right to the end. So I figure if I do my work early in my younger years and achieve that'll set me up the best way to be able to achieve that. So physically, my approach to my exercise was pretty similar. It was very functional. It
Hmm.
was about not trying to be jacked or trying to be sort of the Instagram model or any of that sort of stuff. Couldn't care less. I'm married with kids, and that's not my focus. My
Sure.
focus is being able to be fully engaged with my kids, being able to, like I have in my mind's eye, it's like, right, when I'm 70 and my grandkids are running around the backyard playing, call it, touch football or playing any game, it's like, I want them to pick me to be first on their team because I'm the best player. Like, I want them to go, you know what? Granddad or Pop here, he's a legend. I just want him on my team. To me, that's a huge victory. So
Oh,
it's nothing
totally.
about, yeah, it's nothing about the look or anything about that. It's purely about the functional side of things. So my training has been, I fell in love with calisthenics, because to me it's a bit of a superpower sort of stealth exercise regime, because no one that does calisthenics and is very good at it looks like they could, lift a mountain, but they genuinely can. Like, they've got enormous amounts of strength, but it's very sort of covert. But not only strength, it's their mobility. So they're flexible. They can move their body the right way. And when you've got everything working well around that mobility and strength, there's no limitations on what you can do. You can run, you can sprint, you can move around without the fear of pulling a muscle or doing it back in or any of that sort of stuff. So to me, the evolutionary approach from diet plus the functional movement sort of style of training just really resonated with me, and I fell in love with it. I just felt great, and the more I did it, the better I felt. So it was a very healthy feedback loop.
Oh yeah, and I 100% agree with you on what you said around the calisthenics. I mean, like pull-ups and dips. In my opinion, it's basically the squat and the deadlift for the upper body, and then all the other movements. Like, you don't need really, when you think about it, you can do calisthenics anywhere, like push-ups, sit-ups, leg lifts, air squats, lunges, jumping lunges. I mean, you name it. You don't necessarily need a lot of equipment. Like, you just basically need your body weight, and you can get a fantastic workout. So from what you were saying around just the longevity piece, like if you can do calisthenics into your set, and you can, like there's tons of videos of people online doing calisthenics and pull-ups all the way into like their 70s, 80s, 90s and longer. So it's like, yeah, it makes complete sense from like, the longevity aspect that you're trying to attain. So I definitely want to go into, because this, in my opinion, it's one of the more interesting things like about you here. So without even being a runner, you did the 5 marathons in 5 days. So let's go back to that here real quick. So did you do, like, I know you have been fat adapted all the way up into the point you had decided to say like, okay, I'm going to do this. Was there any sort of like training leading up to that point? Like maybe a little bit, like what did it look like leading up to like the first marathon? Like what did the workout and the diet look like? Did you change anything specifically?
Yeah, so I did my homework, and when I made the decision to do the 5 marathons, it was like, okay, I better start running here. I haven't run for 10 years.
Yeah, probably would be a good idea.
Yeah, I need to tick that box. So that's the homework I have to do. So there
Yeah.
wasn't so much around, okay, how do I become fat adapted at the same time as figuring out the training? It was fat adapted. We got it sorted. I'll just sort of tighten that up a little bit to make sure I've got given myself the best chance. And then from the training, given I hadn't run for 10 years, it was, look, let's just start. So, and look, once I committed, I said, look, I'm going to do this. It's going to be, 131 miles is what I'm going to be covering, 132 miles. And I figured, right, I better start getting some kilometers in the legs. So I'd done enough running to know that, you can't just cheat your way through that. You have to spend the time doing it. So I
Yeah.
went for my first run, and it was probably a mile and a half into the run that I blew my calf, and I was like, oh dear, I've pulled a muscle here. I went, oh, this is going to be hard. So I gave myself a year of training, and a lot of
That
that
was
was,
going to be my next question, like how
yeah.
long? So
Yeah, so it was a good year of training, which was, like I said, I was starting from ground zero. I couldn't run 2 kilometers without an injury. So it
that's
was,
wild.
it was okay. Well, this is going to be harder than I thought. So then I worked my way up. So it was, two kilometers I'd do, then it would be 5, then it would be 10, and I'd slowly scale my way up to just get those kilometers in the legs. Now, given I injured myself a lot during that training, because when you give yourself a year and you want to be able to do 132 miles, it's like, right, I need to push pretty hard here.
Yeah.
On reflection, I would do it a bit differently now. I would do a bit more strength training and avoid that injury. But given I had multiple injuries during my training, my focus went pretty quickly from going, okay, let's do sort of my best marathon pace for each of these and really try and smash it out, to how do I do this without pulling a muscle or doing something that's going to prevent me from achieving my very clear objective of covering the distance during a 5-day fasting period. So to me, that was the main goal, and I was not tempted to, and I don't regret that either, trying to push too hard, because the last thing I wanted would be to be 4 marathons in and tear a quad muscle or something and then say, oh, I can't complete this. So hence my strategy was very much the low and slow, I call it, keeping my heart rate to a specific level, which was, again, by design to manage, call it my fuel burn, if given sort of that mentality. And then more than anything, just be able to think, well, if I'm going slow, then that's going to reduce the chances of me having some horrific injury that's going to prevent me from achieving my goal.
Oh man, I've got so many questions here. So, just out of curiosity, like what were the average miles that you were running? Like, what was the average pace per mile or kilometer, whatever you want to call
Yes,
it, that you were running?
I'm not so good on the miles pacing, but
Yeah,
yeah, indulge me with kilometers, because they're here in Oz. That's how we do it.
sure.
But so all of my training, look, I'd love to be doing, like, for me, sort of around that 5-minute pace per kilometer would be great. I went, that's sort of pretty quick. So 5-minute pace would be, let's interpret it sort of for marathon. What are we? 42, 200 minutes. That'd be like 3.5 hours, I suppose, would be like for a marathon, which is maybe a bit more. Anyway, forgive my maths. But in very quickly, it was like, that's way too quick. I'm gonna tear something here. So I
Got it.
backed it right off, and then my training was I would like to hit sort of that 7 kilometers per 7 minute pace per kilometer would be sort of ideal. So to give you an idea, 7 kilometers, a 7 minute pace in an hour, it's kind of what would that be? Sort of about 6 kilometers per hour it would be, somewhere around there. No,
Mm-hmm.
more than that, double that, about 9. Um, so yeah, keeping it pretty slow. So, but then my strategy really changed. It was, I used to run to pace and say, right, I'm going to run at this pace, and then my heart will compensate according to that. Then it changed entirely. It was, okay, I'm going to keep my heart rate at a specific zone, and the pace will be whatever it has to be. So if my heart rate races away on me, then I'm going to back it right off until my heart rate comes back down again. And then
Gotcha.
once it would do that, then I would pick up the pace again. So my pace was the result of how hard my heart was working, was my mentality, which in all my training, to be honest, was very liberating, because it meant anytime I'd ever run before, it was like, right, I've got to be on the limit the whole time. I'm working really hard. When you're running to specific heart rates, it's largely out of your control, because you can't mentally change your heart rate. You can only change the pace at which you're moving. So when it would creep away on me, it was like, well, I have to back off here. Even though I feel like I'm still okay, I'm running to that heart rate. So it would be give me a period to sort of mentally relax.
So and then you also added in the component of doing a lot of these runs fasted, right?
Yeah.
So just to clarify here, were you doing the whole 5 days fasted, or you would eat after the run, or would you eat before the run and just not have any sort of like intra-run like sort of like meal replacement or anything like that? Was there eating before, after you were done with the marathons?
In the 5 marathons, you mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
No. So just think about it. It was a complete 5 day fast. So think
Okay,
nothing but salt and water for an entire 5 days. Start with that, and
yeah.
then you do a marathon every one of those days.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to clarify and just double check here. So was there a reason why you layered on the fasting component with the 5 back-to-back marathons? Just out of curiosity?
Yeah, that's right. Because remember, I came from it from the nutritional stance. So what I'd
Mm-hmm.
learnt was that we have enormous amounts of energy stored in our body. So just to dig into that a little bit, I'm quite lean. So on today's standards, I'm definitely lean, even according to DEXA. When I did that, I was about 14 to 15% body fat. Sounds high, but according to a DEXA scan, which gives you a full body composition, I'm in the top sort of 4% of like lean individuals for my age. So by every metric, I'm lean. Now, even at that level, I have more than 100,000 calories of stored energy in my fat reserves. Translate to marathons, you'd say, well, how many marathons could you do with that amount of energy? And the staggering thing is, it's 22 marathons is what the maths would sort of suggest. So 22 marathons, I figured, look, I'm only going to do 5. Clearly, I've got more than enough than I need. So my objective was, how can I demonstrate the amount of energy we have on our body in a world that believes you can't get through just one marathon without, jamming the gels in or the carbs or refueling, let alone forget marathons. People think I can't go a whole day without eating because
100%.
I
Yeah.
won't be able to have the energy. So I'm like, okay, well, I can address that pretty quickly, because if anyone thinks that they can't go an entire day without eating, then, well, I did 5 days no eating and I did 5 marathons. So it kind of shoots a pretty devastating blow into that belief. So that's where I came from. So it was like, how can I demonstrate the amount of energy I have? So the fasting element wasn't about at that point, it wasn't about performance. It wasn't about anything other than the only way I can address the naysayers that were saying, no, there was something else going on, that you were getting your fuel source from somewhere that wasn't from your body, was to say, well, I did it completely fasted. There is zero chance that I got my energy from anything else other than what I had stored on my body at the time.
Wow, that is wild. And yeah, that just going back to what you were saying, I think it's so funny. I mean, especially here in the States, where we've got like, I don't know, basically it's an obesity epidemic, where people can't go more than a few hours with it without eating, and people start to freak out, like going an entire day without eating, or maybe eating like one meal a day. But you're coming out here and you're doing 5 marathons over 5 days, all back to back, just just salt and electrolytes and water, basically.
Yeah,
Like
that's right.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty damn impressive. So here's my next question then. So in regards to like your body composition after, like this is all done after the 5 marathons, and in the absence of, all the calories, right? You're just running off stored body fat. Was there like a noticeable difference in regards to your body composition? Like, because I think a lot of people would say, like, well, he probably burned through a lot of his muscle mass or whatever, because, he's already a lean guy. He burned through stored body fat, not consuming any calories. He's probably just burning muscle. Like, what did you notice any of that in terms of when you were done? Like, muscle wasting, any of that do you find to happen?
yeah, so I was very deliberate in making sure I tracked that because that's an obvious question that people would ask, and I didn't
Sure.
want to rely on a before and after photo. The lighting in your last photo was different to the first one, so I don't believe you, or when did you do it, all that sort of stuff. So I did it properly. So the day before I did my 5 marathons, I had a full body composition DEXA scan, and the day after I did my 5 marathons and the 5 days of fasting, I did the same thing. So I've
Okay.
got hard data that shows what happened in the change in my body during that period. Now, it was pretty fascinating because people run the maths. So they go, well, the maths is this, you're going to lose this amount of weight, because that whole, calories in, calorie out model and all that sort of, I'll call it garbage, call it is what it is. So, and the beauty of that is that, I've now done the most extreme version of eat less and move more, which everyone subscribes to, or a lot of people do in terms of way to losing weight. And I can tell you it was very inefficient. So according to my DEXA, I lost 3 kilos of weight over that entire period, which isn't a lot. But of that, 1 kilo of that was body fat. So I had 11 and a quarter kilograms of fat on me prior to starting, and at the end of it I'd lost only 1 kilo. So it was about 10% of my fat reserves was all that I used during that entire period, which is astounding.
What?
um,
That's crazy.
yeah, so when I did the maths of my 22 marathons according to the calorie content of that fat prior to doing it, it spits out 22, but I only used 1 kilo. I only used 10% of that. So, look, does that mean I could do 10 times that? Like, there's a lot of questions there. But my point is, it's orders of magnitude more. The amount of energy that we have is orders of magnitude more than what we would even consider possible. So, so I lost 1 kilogram of fat. What's that? It's about 2 pounds. And
Yep.
then of the rest of it, again, according to DEXA, they call it lean tissue. Now, people interpret that to be muscle. It is not muscle. It's not just muscle. It's the combination of water, glycogen, and your muscle fibers. So it's all three of those. Now, what I have found fascinating is there actually has been a couple of papers. There's one in particular where they put people on a 7-day fast and they did exercise during the period, nothing like I did, but call it they ran on a treadmill for a little bit or did some weights or something. Pretty standard diet. And they said, well, how much weight would they lose during that period? So, and they didn't do a lot of exercise, to be honest. It was purely just a sort of 7-day fast. And as it turned out, they lost the same, if not more, even call it that same muscle mass and fat than I did. So the difference between their experiment and mine largely was I did 5 marathons on top of what they did, and our results in body composition, the change in those results wasn't significantly different, which I think is astounding because
Yeah.
anyone would place a bet prior to it that I would have lost a hell of a lot more weight, a hell of a lot more fat, and I would have absolutely shredded my muscles because they would have broken down over that period. So while there was some degradation, it was absolutely nothing near what anyone would expect. And the
Totally.
experiment I'd love to do again, which I really should, would be let's do a 5-day fast, 0 marathons, and just see what happens to my body composition to try and isolate how much of the marathons, what impact they have on that body composition.
Yeah, that is pretty damn incredible. And while we're on this kind of topic, I guess, of like tracking, I know you tracked other metrics during your marathons. Like, what were some of the other surprising findings that you found, just like with regards to like blood glucose, ketone levels, your heart rate data? I was just kind of curious to see if there's anything. And the reason why I ask is I feel like I was combing through your Instagram and I saw a post of it was I don't know if it was one of the marathons you did specifically because this was more recent, but it showed your ketones levels elevating very drastically soon after you were like deep into like an endurance event or endurance event. So I'm just kind of curious to see with regards to like glucose, ketones, like heart rate, like were there any other surprising data that you came across?
Yeah, so there was, like I said, I tracked everything. So we'll tick through all of those. So blood
Sure.
glucose is one. A lot of the feedback prior to me doing this was your blood sugar levels are going to crash. They're going to tank because you're going to have no carbohydrates coming in. Your blood sugars just not going to cope. So I wore a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, plus I did the finger prick testing before every run, after every run, and then every evening. And I've got all that data. They matched exactly. Now, my blood sugar, the reality was during that period was rock solid the entire time, which was also astounding. To me, I expected that because my body regulates it. It knows what to do. You throw stuff at it and it will figure out the right level of homeostasis to be able to maintain that blood sugar. So if anyone's ever worn a CGM, you'll know that it does blip around. Like it's
Yep.
not a flat line. Like people just go, when I say flat line, it's not like that. You have a big spike in the morning. I say big, relative in the morning when you wake up, then it'll sort of blip around throughout the day. But when you average it out and you take the average over the 5 days, it ends up being pretty much a flat line. So that was one piece of data that was quite interesting. The ketones for the 5 marathons, the continuous ketone monitors didn't exist then. I would love to have worn one. I have worn one since, and that's what you were referring to. But I
Mm-hmm.
did track my beta hydroxybutyrate, so my blood ketones before, after, and every evening,
What
and
were
I
those? Just out of curiosity, how did those levels change throughout the day? Like when you were resting, waking up, in the middle of a race? I was curious to know.
Yeah, so interestingly, like I've been low, call it fat adapted and carnivore for a very long time. People kind of get a bit wedded to their ketones. They're like, well, your ketones
Sure.
aren't high enough, you're not fat adapted. It's like I haven't eaten a carb for 6 months. Like, what are you talking about here?
Yeah.
This is what my ketone levels are, I
Yeah,
guarantee.
your body was already probably pretty damn efficient at utilizing them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And people say, look, your ketone levels aren't high enough so that proves you're not in ketosis. So I'm like, well, pull your wallet out. How much money have you got in there? Does that show me how wealthy you are? Like, no, it doesn't. It's what you carry.
That's a good rebuttal right there.
Yeah, exactly that. So my ketone levels, what did happen was that they steadily increased over time. So for me, I sort of blip around. They're pretty low. They're always positive, which to me is the indication of being in ketosis. So it would be 0.1 to 0.3 millimoles is all I would ever be while I was full carnivore, even with all my training leading up to it. Fasting changed all that. So as soon as I was fasting, in addition to my marathons, they ramped up enormously. So every day I would see a steady increase. So I don't have the numbers here, but from recollection, it might be first day 0.1, second day 2.3, next day 3.4, then 4, then it
Oh,
was 5.
damn.
Yeah, so every day was more and more, which when you're doing what I did, you're looking for those little mental tricks. It was like, how cool is this? My fuel source is increasing the more I do this. Like,
Yeah, your body was 100% adapting to what you were putting it through.
yeah, I was throwing some serious challenges at it, and my body was responding appropriately, which was, all right, you want to do more? We'll give you more. Like, we'll build it. And I'm like,
How cool is that?
yeah, so it was really, really cool. So my ketones definitely increased the whole way through. And the post you were talking about was post my 5 marathons recently, I did a backyard ultra. So it's a
Yes,
specific
that was it.
marathon. I ended up doing 100 kilometers over that period, which is 15 hours of continuous running. In that format. For those that aren't familiar with the backyard ultra, it's like the world's hardest beep test. So you have 1 hour to complete a 6.7 kilometer loop. If you don't make it back, you're out. And then if you do make it back, you have to start again on the next hour. And there's no finish line in that race. The last person to tap out is the winner, and everyone else gets a DNF.
Yeah, it's
Cool.
like a last man standing type of deal.
Correct, exactly
Yeah.
that coolest event. Anyway, so I'd never done anything more than a marathon. I did that one. I wore a continuous ketone monitor as well as the glucose monitor. But yeah, while I was running during that, my ketones just absolutely rocketed. So they went pretty quickly from sort of my point one, which is where they normally sit, all the way up to sort of well over 5 or 6, I think it was. And but again, while you're running, if you're checking that live, which I was able to do in that one, seeing your fuel source increase while you're doing this stuff, and everyone else is starting to struggle, it's like, wow, this is like jet fuel. This is awesome. So that was very cool.
Yeah, and to the point too, because I saw, I think it was another podcast that you did or something else that you posted, but you were also negative splitting a lot of these, correct?
In the which one for
The
the back?
the 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 marathons, the back to backs.
Oh, so for the back to back. So yeah, like I said, I was running to heart rate for all of it, and again for the first four, I'm running by myself. It was super hot. It was close to 100 degrees Fahrenheit when I was running. I wasn't expecting that, and so my first one was my quickest, call it that, because I was fresh and ready to go.
Yeah.
And then my second fastest of all of them was the final marathon. So after 5 days, I did a faster
No
time than I did
way.
for all of them. Now, again, I'm not trying to set marathon times. And a lot of people are like, yeah, but that wasn't you didn't win anything and it wasn't a record marathon time. I'm like, you're kind of forgetting that I did the equivalent of an ultra marathon over a 5 day period where you can't sort of just keep going. You have to stop, and your body has to burn energy while you're waiting to be able to start the next one. So yeah, my pace for all of my marathons, even now, I would say was appropriate for a 132-mile race, or an event, I should say. So but yeah, in terms of just how it turned out, yeah, my last marathon, which was the official Sydney Marathon, was faster than the three prior that I had done, and only second to the first one that I had done.
Yeah, that is wild. So after the very first marathon, like you were done, knowing that you had four more left that you were going to do, like what were you going through in terms of like that thought process? Were you kind of completely wrecked? Were you like, oh God, like what have I done here, or what have I signed up to do? Like how were you feeling after the first one in terms of
Well,
energy levels, everything, your body?
I'm not going to lie. My first thought was, oh man, a marathon is a really, really long way. I'd never done one before. So I was like, okay, that's hard. Like, I'm not going to lie, it is hard. At the end of it, did I feel like I had no energy? Definitely not. So I had plenty of energy is what I should say. So that was never an issue. It was more just the amount of effort, like doing anything for that long and for that amount of distance takes a bit of mental fortitude. So it was a challenge. And so having done one, realizing that, yeah, it's pretty hard. That thought of doing four more of those back to back was, at that point, that was probably the hardest point mentally to go, okay, I've bitten off a lot here. I've got to chew pretty hard to get through this. There's a lot of work ahead. So that first day was a tough one because it was more that realization that this was pretty real. Like there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, totally. I mean, did you, over the course of those 5 days, did you run into any other setbacks? I know you said the temperature was kind of probably a pain in the butt here, but were there under any other setbacks that you were running into? Did you run into like strains, pulls, any of that stuff, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I had plenty in every story. So, and every day was, I had to tune into a certain mindset to be able to get through what I did, because solving the fueling problem is one thing, but there's a mental element to it as well. It's like that drive to just keep going when there's a lot of adversity being thrown at you. So it wasn't energy levels or hunger weren't the challenges that I really had to overcome. One was absolute extreme heat during the full 5 days. So
Hmm.
we're close to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It was about 38 degrees Celsius, which is insane, even in the time of year I was doing it. And yeah, managing that was very difficult. The other elements I had, well, here in Australia, you can't run anywhere without seeing snakes. So you'd run along and see a red-bellied black snake, which is one of the most venomous snakes in the world, at your feet. That gets your heart rate going, I tell you.
Yep.
Other things like a great story was on the fourth day of my fourth marathon. The course that I had mapped out, I had to alter because they were holding a triathlon during on that day, and the course they use for like the Western Sydney Triathlon, and where they run the Western City Marathon. Anyway, they closed it, so I was like, I have to adjust here. So I ended up running this loop just sort of around the river where I live, which was a sort of 6 or 7 kilometre loop. I just ran around it. The Saturday turned out to be they're holding a food festival. So they were smoking barbecue meats all day. So it's 38 degrees. all I can smell is barbecue while I'm running, and I'm 4 days into my fast, and like I was like, okay, what else can you throw at me here? This is getting pretty comical. And then the biggest challenge of all of them was for my fourth and my fifth marathon, the amount of volume I had done and putting a lot of stress on my joints. So my joint ligaments and tendons were really copping a pounding. So my big muscles were fine, no muscle soreness, but it was the biggest challenge was having I had grade 2 ankle sprains for my last two marathons. So running when your ankles look like an elephant ankle, like they were really swollen, and a lot of that was against a lot of water retention that I had was problematic because of the heat. I'd overhydrated during that period. So combination of overhydration plus sprained ankles. I've got to tell you, when you rock up to the Sydney Marathon on the start line, you've got two sprained ankles. It's like, right, this is going to sting, and it certainly did. So, yeah, that was another thing, which I think is also coming back to the pacing point. It was seriously hard. I had a lot of challenges there that weren't. I'm rocking up fresh alongside everyone else, so I should be running as fast as everyone else. It was like, okay, I need to manage a lot of things here. There's a lot going on, but for me, just kind of keep moving, don't stop, and we will get it done.
Yeah,
And look, I
no.
can share with you probably my strongest sort of superpower mental edge that I used. It was people say accept the pain and enjoy the pain. I'm like, yeah, that's really good in theory, but pain hurts for a reason, and it's like just accepting it. To me, you can choose to do that, and that's fine. I did do that. The biggest and most powerful one was turning my pain into gratitude. And what I did was I would say to myself, okay, my legs are stinging here. I'm running. This hurts like hell because, I've got sprained ankles while I'm running. I'd ask myself the question, all right, Alex, if you tomorrow broke your back and you could never use your legs again, in 5 years' time or even tomorrow, how much would you give to be able to feel the pain in your legs right now and do what you're doing? And I'm like, okay. So once I feel there are people out there that would give their life to be able to feel the pain because they can't, that's been taken away from them. So that's what I mean by gratitude. I became supremely gratuitous towards the fact that I was in pain. Sounds crazy, but it was, because some people can't do what I'm trying to do here. And once I did that, it was like, right, there's no way I'm ever tapping out now, because imagine those guys, if you couldn't do what I'm doing now and you heard that I tapped out because I was hurting, it's like, come on. So to me, that was my superpower. It was like, right, use that mindset, and I became unstoppable.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually really, really cool because, I would say everyone who is doing any sort of a race, whether it's half marathon, marathon, an ultra, whatever the case is, everyone goes through some sort of a pain. And I feel like everyone's got some sort of a mental game that they play, or like some sort of repetition that they repeat in their mind, like one foot in front of the other, one foot, just keep going. And they find a way, everyone finds a way to ultimately like finish whatever it is that they're doing. But no, that's a really interesting way to go about it, and I would say, I can understand how that would help kind of clear the skies, in your mind a little bit, just thinking to yourself like, listen, there are probably a ton of people that wish that they could do what I'm doing right now, or just be able to have the capability to run, but to like frame it in that way, I could definitely see how that could not just relieve the pain, but ultimately lift you up from a positive mindset standpoint to just kind of almost be happy while you're in this grind that you're going through.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And some of those tricks are hugely important. And anyone that's ever done something like an ultra marathon would absolutely know what I'm talking about. And everyone has their own version of it. The thing that I would say, like, I'd never done a marathon before this, and then an ultra, and I've kind of fallen into the space, but I've fallen in love with it. And people, I used to think, you're a lunatic for trying to do an ultra marathon. Like, what is wrong with you? If anyone that would try and do that, I now totally understand. What it is when you put yourself in a situation like that where it feels hopeless and you're really, really struggling. Everyone has a choice. It doesn't matter if you're going to win that event or if you're going to come last. Or everyone in that event will have this moment where it will be everything in your entire existence is telling you to stop and to give up because it's hard. And then you have a choice, and you make the choice, which is, I choose in this moment where everything is screaming at me to stop, I choose not to, and I choose to keep going. And then when you finish that event, having made that choice, when you look back in the rear vision mirror and said, there was a moment there, I know deep down that everything was telling me to give up, and I didn't. And once you conquer that and you achieve what you did by finishing that event, that feeling, no one will ever take away from you. It is the most incredible feeling of satisfaction, and it reframes everything else in your life. It's like, right, another challenge gets thrown at me in day-to-day life. It's like, you know what? I did this like last week at this ultra. I felt like that and I got through it. You know what? Yeah, if the kids are giving me a hard time today, or someone's, work's giving me a bit of a headache, it's like, you know what? I can get through it because I've done so much harder. And it really, I found it's elevated just my thinking in my normal everyday life as a result of it, which was completely unexpected because I went into it just to prove a point around, energy. But I've achieved and received a lot more out of what I did than what I could ever have dreamed of.
Yeah, it's probably made you super confident too, and just every other aspect of your life, knowing that, you did a lot of that stuff. You can basically handle anything that's thrown at you. So totally makes sense. I kind of wanted to get into, because it sounds like to me you've done other since that time, because I know when you did this was back in 2023, right? Five
Yeah.
marathons in 5 days, that was 2023. And it sounds like to me you've clearly done a handful of other like endurance ultra running events, so I kind of wanted to get into how you do and like what your training looks like now, and talk about like strength training and maybe some exercises you do specifically to like help with running economy, running efficiency. But I had this question pop up into my mind because you said that during one of your races, like you were running through an area where they were like smoking meats and it was probably really hard for you to get through because you're probably starving at that point. What was the first thing you ate when you were done with the rate when you were done with the fifth marathon? What was like the first meal?
I dreamed of that moment, I have to say. Prior to doing it, I even went to my butcher and I said, "Can you get me the biggest possible steak you can? Like, cut me an enormous tomahawk. I'm gonna absolutely tear this thing apart when I finish." So I had visions of me running across the finish line and literally like tucking into this big bone and the whole thing straight away. The reality was when I finished, I wasn't the slightest bit hungry. Like my satiety level was still super high. I was like, I don't even want to eat. So that evening, I did eat because I thought I probably should. It's been 5 days and I've done 132 miles here. Like I probably need to recharge, but my body was not telling me whatsoever that food was necessary because I was in that state, which was to me quite astounding. Everyone's like, "How did you hang on mentally with the hunger?" I was like, it wasn't even on the radar, not even close.
Yeah.
So for one, that tells me, well, look, I probably could have kept going, and I'd love to do a longer, bigger one. But to answer your question specifically, that night I had probably 2 hamburger patties and an egg. Like, and to me, that would be barely like a side dish in a normal meal. When I would eat, I eat a lot. But to me, I couldn't even finish it. Like, I was literally just so. My satiety was so high. So it took me probably 3 days to get back to my normal eating sort
Oh,
of
dang, that's crazy.
volume, just to readjust and sort of recalibrate again, which again to me was staggering and very much unexpected.
No, yeah, that's cool. And that makes tons of sense. Like I know when I'm typically done with even like shorter duration workouts, like I'm usually not hungry at all just because like how the body's kind of like working through things. So that makes a ton of sense to me. So going back to some of the exercises that you're doing now, strength training, some of those things, because it sounds like to me you're kind of going into other events and have done a lot of other events since then. So are there any forms of like strength training you kind of gravitate towards more than others, like specific exercises, like I said earlier, that help with like running economy, things that you prefer over another? I was just kind of curious to see what that looks like.
Yeah. So when I started this, I was complete amateur, which was, all I got to do, I got to run a long way, so I'll just practice running. And it was all about the running, and that was the entire focus. I learnt my lessons because when you do particularly long distance stuff, the really long stuff, any of the sins, I call them sins because sort of imbalances in your body where the correct muscles aren't firing at the right time to do what you need to do, you get found out because other muscles compensate. So that's where you get, niggly back or niggly whatever while you're running. It's because certain muscles are overworking. So for me, the lesson I learned now and the stuff I really concentrate on, particularly when I did my 100-kilometer backyard ultra recently, was very much dial down the running, like still need to do that, but focus very, very heavily on the strength training, which was a lot of, it's not lifting heavy, it's like the isometric holds. So that's the stuff where you're call it, you have like a static bar and you're just pushing against it. So it's like really putting a lot of strain on your joints and your muscles. So that was a big one. Doing a lot of those exercises under full range of motion as well. It's like calf raises, doing like full range calf raises, but doing load when they're sort of maximally stretched as well, within reason. And again, I'm not lifting heavy. It's about just doing it full range in those certain periods. But I also was a bit smarter about it. I got a full assessment in my training. It was like, where are my deficiencies? Like, are my quads overfiring? Is it my glutes that are underdone? Which parts just aren't working? And then I had a very specific program, which was, right, these are the exercises you need to do, or I need to do, to be able to target those areas to make me, I would call it my legs bulletproof, like make sure they're firing as well as they need. So that focus on that strength training was huge, and it made a massive difference. Like, the difficulty in my 100-kilometer ultra marathon was nowhere near the difficulty of my 5 marathons. Obviously I was doing a different distance, but just in the experience itself, because my body was so much more well balanced in the way that it was moving, rather than just trying to brute force my way because my running technique is terrible and I'm doing horrible things to my body while I'm I'm asking of my body while I do it. So very much strength training is a huge part of particularly the ultra marathon and the running piece.
Yeah, and that makes tons of sense too. So like in terms of like what is your right now your let's like take like a typical 7-day week. Like how do you break up your training, your running and your strength and conditioning? Are you running like 3 to 4 days a week? Or are you doing strength training like 3 days a week? Like what body parts, like what does that look like out of curiosity?
Well, there's two parts to that question. One is, look, I'm injured at the moment, so as of right
Oh
now,
no.
my training is rehab. So that's it. But we can get to that. Call it when I'm training for an event or doing something that I'm working specifically towards. My routine would be, it would be 3 days a week. I would be doing strength training, which would be like those isometric holds, a lot of explosive stuff as well, sort of box jumps and that sort of impact sort of thing, which is training my body. And then the kilometers in the legs would be, I'd be running usually about 4 days a week, sometimes 5, depending on what that would be. And again, you have to balance it with life. Like, this isn't a full-time endeavor for me. It would be trying to balance that around my day. So for me, the only time of the day I can actually own is early. So I'll get up at 4:30 or 4 o'clock and do my runs. If I'm doing a long run with my sort of 5 marathon stuff, it was like, right, I have to go for a 2-hour run every day. So I get up at 4, come back at 6 because the kids are waking up and I got to cook them breakfast. So you got to balance your life with it as well. So I'd be doing strength training 3 times a week. I'd be running 4 to 5 times a week. And then I'd definitely be having some days of rest, and I'd be alternating with my strength training, making sure I have rest days in between those. And then
Gotcha.
on top of that as well, and I'd mix it in even with my strength days, I'd be doing some mobility work. So I'd be doing a lot of stretching. It might be sort of half an hour, 40 minutes of each session of doing stretching. And I try and do that ideally 3 times a week, but reality would be it's probably max about 2 times a week.
Gotcha. Okay. And then so in terms of, you mentioned this earlier, so it sounds like you're injured. Like what specifically are you doing from like a rehab perspective, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so in February this year, I actually had neck surgery. So I had a discectomy. So I've got a beautiful little zipper at the back of my neck where they had to go in and cut out some of my disc that was protruding into one of my nerves that was.
Oh no.
So it was extreme pain. So it's like 11 out of 10 pain is right up there. And I had to get the surgery because they said, look, if you don't get it done, there's a chance that you'll lose mobility in your arm. That was the symptom that I had. And I was losing all strength and muscle tone and everything on that side of my body. So that happened very quickly. December last year is when it happened. I had to get surgery in February. So for now, it's okay. I've got to get my neck strong again. And I was supposed to be doing, there's the 100-kilometer ultra marathon in Sydney here, the Blue Mountains. I believe it's one of the majors now. I was signed up for that. I've still got my ticket because I couldn't get rid of it, but part of me was, I don't want to get rid of it. If there's a small chance that I'd be able to
Sure.
do it, I know there's not. So yeah, given my neck surgery, I can't run yet because it'd be a silly thing to do. I need to give my body the time to heal. And once I have healed, then I'd absolutely love to do that again. So my next thing would be, doing one of those 100-kilometer ultra marathons. Even 100 miles would be also very cool. Beautiful scenery, but the elevation is the part that is huge.
Mm.
So it's, I I think with the up and downs, you're climbing almost the equivalent of Everest during that period. So it's like for the 100 miles, it's like it's insane. So but yeah, I kind of gravitate towards the more insane it is, the more I like it now. Coming back to that very much point of, well, when you conquer some demons and you get through it, it's like, what else can I do? I've undersold myself here, and I'm learning that we are all much more capable than we ever could perceive, or believe. So that's where I've fallen in love with call it the ultra marathon, or just doing the hard stuff.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, and I'm wishing you a speedy recovery, man, and hopefully you can get back on track and keep doing what you're doing because you're clearly good at it, and I think it's awesome. And I know we're coming up here on time here. I had a couple questions here before we wrap up, and maybe have, ask some things about what you've got coming up here in the future. But with regards to everything that you've done up to this point and where you're at right now, like, how do you think your overall experience with the 5 marathons over 5 days, and like the way you train and the diet that you're leveraging to do the things that you're doing, how do you think like these experiences are like challenging conventional wisdom around or about nutrition and endurance? Because obviously like what you're are doing is completely different, I would say, than what a lot of people have thought to be true in the past around needing carbs for energy and those types of things. Like, how do you think what you're doing has challenged that in a way?
Yeah, I hope it's shone a light on the fact that there is a different approach. There is a different way to do this. And I've gone down the rabbit hole. I've studied a lot of the science, and I don't call myself a scientist by any stretch, but I've do have a passion for it, and I've learned a lot. Now, in terms of conveying the message of what I have done, I can have an argument with someone around, well, this study says this and this person did that, and we can argue till the cows come home as to which one of those is correct. What I'm most proud of is what I have done is anyone that tries to tell me that now that you need to have carbohydrates or even anything to be able to do 5 marathons in 5 days completely fasted, it is impossible. I can look them squarely in the eye and tell them they are 100% wrong. And I don't care how many studies they point to or what they will do, the fact that I can say, well, I've done it, shuts that down completely. So that's my contribution to the space. It's like, right, when you can do something that is so definitive that it just puts a knife right through anyone's belief or any argument. So to me, that's extremely powerful. So what I did, people will often say, well, from a performance point of view, you haven't proven this, and from X, Y, Z, you haven't proven that. And I say, oh, no, that's exactly right. You're 100% correct. But what I have done is I've moved the needle. I've moved us forward one little step, which means that for forever and a day now, no one can ever say that what I did is not possible because I have done it. And also that belief of, okay, you're going to run out of energy if you don't have your carbs. Like that, that's a fundamental belief that a lot of people believe. I can hand on heart now say, well, that's absolutely false, because I can be the example of what is possible when you take a different approach. So yeah, what I'm hoping is that someone can run with what I have done and take it to that next level. I'm hoping that I can be the inspiration for others to give it a go. And I'm not just talking about the athletes in the world or the marathon runners or anyone like that. I'd love those guys to run with it because they're like, this is cool. It gives me an edge. How do I get the edge in my competition? Much like a Formula One car, if I don't have to change my tires during the race, like to reload or refuel, how much extra time is that going to give me? So there's that side of it, but also the everyday person that says, you know what, I struggle. I can't go 2 hours without eating. I'm thinking about food all day. I've got no energy. I need to, I live for my coffee, or I need to live for my snacks to be able to get through my day. I'm hoping I'm the inspiration to those people to say, well, you know what, if I change my thinking around nutrition, if I become fat adapted, all of that goes away. You don't need to snack. You do not get hungry. People say I'm obsessed about food. I would argue the opposite. I don't think about food at all. Like, I'll get to the end of my day and can't remember if I had lunch because I'm not even hungry, and I'm not even thinking about it.
Yeah,
So
same.
yeah, and it's very, very liberating. So I'm hoping I'm an inspiration to those out there to give them the courage to say, you know what, I might give this fat adaptation thing a go, because if it works for me, imagine what I can do with it. How much better would my life be if I don't have to think about food and I have enormous amounts of energy?
Yeah, 100%. And at the end of the day, like what you also did was pretty damn cool. Like no matter what, like it's just a cool thing to be able to say that you did that. And I agree with you 100%. Like, when you're eating more of a lower carb, ketogenic type of diet, like the last thing you're thinking about is food. You can go all day long without thinking about it. And then ultimately, like you can spend time with your family eating dinner and having a nice meal and go about your day. Like, I think the crazy thing is we, we don't need as much food as we think we do. You know what I mean? Especially in the States. That's the problem that we got over here. Like everyone just eats, in my opinion, way too much, and that's why everyone's obese, right? But yeah, man, this was an awesome conversation. Clearly, you're a super interesting guy. What's coming up? What's next for you, Alex? Like what's coming down the road? And I mean, I know you got the injury and you're recovering from the surgery. And it's kind of a bummer that you can't. It sounds like you might not be able to run that one race that you signed up for. But what is coming up next, and what are your plans for the future?
Yeah, for me, I just love to keep doing what I'm doing because I firmly believe that I'm on the right path with, particularly with my nutrition. I think the world their eyes are opening to this being an alternative way of doing things, and it's becoming inspiring a lot of people to move away from the kind of the sickness paradigm that we live in now around, you get sick and you just compensate with pills and drugs to be able to compensate that, to a more holistic way of living, to be able to be our best versions of ourselves. So I'd like to do another endeavor, which is, oh, well, hopefully as crazy as the ones I've done already, because I kind of really enjoy doing that. But I'm coming from the right place. I'm not doing it to get clicks or try and get attention. What I'm trying to do is demonstrate to people that there's another way and there is hope. There is a way to be able to elevate our lives that doesn't involve visits to the doctor and doesn't involve a whole bunch of pills and cocktails and complicated things. Every other animal that has ever existed in the wild has the perfect body composition for their species of animal in their environment. Like not one of them has to think about what they're doing or use their brains to intervene and say, I need to do this because nature got it wrong. It's like at the end of the day, we are animals, and we just need to liberate our thinking and get our heads out of out of the road and just allow our bodies to do what they should do. And when we do that, we can live our lives to their fullest, and all of those issues around sickness and hunger and all the needs to snack and just all that sort of stuff, it all evaporates. And what a great way to live. So I
Yeah,
hope
yeah, we live the way that we were designed to.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Coming back to my first point, that's how I started all this. So I'm very proud to say that I feel I'm living that, and I'm giving myself the best chance to, like I said, be picked first on my grandkids' sporting team to be able to play with them, because not through because I want granddad to. I like him. It's more because I want to win. I want to have the best people on my team. I want him in there. Like who doesn't want to be that guy?
Yeah, of course, man. Well, I mean, obviously, at the rate that you're going, it seems like that's absolutely going to happen. So, yeah, this has been fantastic. And again, I want to be respectful of your time here. So, where can people like find you online? How can people get in touch with you? How can kind of people keep up with what you're doing and what you got next? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so if you want to learn about what I did, particularly with the 5 marathons, my website is a treasure trove of information. So ketomarathons.com. I have all my data on there, talking about how I went about it, what I did, plus what I ate and the right ways of going about it in my view, plus some great resources. So ketomarathons.com. And then on social media, Instagram's where I'm most active. My handle is at Keto Marathons. I do post lots of my interviews and lots of my thoughts and what's sort of happening, but also lots of other cool things that other people are doing, because it's been a great platform for me, for even world-class athletes, to reach out to little old me that's never run a marathon prior to doing what I did, and ask me for advice about how to get the most out of performance, which is a kind of a cool idea and not something I would have expected. So I'm very much about promoting anyone else in that space or in this space with a consistent message around what we are doing, and Instagram is a great platform for me to do that. So at Keto Marathons, you'll find me there. And if you want to see I would argue, a lot of people that are a hell of a lot cooler than I am, doing a hell of a lot cooler things, and achieving, but using the same premise and idea of where I'm coming from, then yeah, check out both those resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll put all the links to everything in the show notes, and I'll upload everything to YouTube. So all the resources will be there. Thanks again, man, for your time. This has been fantastic. And thank you guys for listening to the Low Carb Consultant podcast. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
Thanks, Max.